What is the scariest story you know to be completely true? Guy I used to work with was murdered and dismembered by his crime partner, who was caught just nonchalantly driving his vehicle around town. A couple years before, I had had a conversation with him, the murder victim, about concealed carry licenses and how that would work inside a workplace, and he told me the story about his ex-wife was plotting to kill him and how he'd worked out carrying a gun on campus with security, only to be murdered and dismembered by someone else a couple years later. My father's ship sank in the North Atlantic. Most of his shipmates, including the friend he enlisted with, died of exposure while awaiting rescue. The bodies remained in the lifeboat. What was the ship? Ships. The SS Marstenin, the SS Temple Meade, and the SS Thirlby. He was kind of a Jonah. My childhood friends took over a gas plant in Algeria, held the workers hostage and then killed 37 people and themselves. Interesting story. I tried to do a deep dive on Aaron Yoon, but last I found was a few articles from 2013 saying he returned home. Any updates? What do you do after being caught up in something like that? Yeah, the Canadian got him out of jail in Mauritania and brought him back. Last I heard he was working at a shawarma shop, but that was a while ago. Geez, this is insane. Were they always weird or only after radicalizing? Ali and Aaron were both super outgoing and social. Chris was always quiet and kinda kept to himself. Ali was popular at school and kinda took Chris under his wing. Chris changed his name to Mustafa after taking up Islam. I used to play basketball, smoke weed and hang out with them all the time. Normal teenage stuff. Never would have imagined them doing anything like this. I recently found out that Chris was the one that called / was in contact with the president of the gas company. He was the one making the demands at the time of the attack. They've released transcript of the calls. I was pretty shocked to find that out. He was very meek and quiet when I knew him. Worked with kids in foster care. A 17-year-old girl says she's got a secret to tell her court-appointed special advocate. Now, we got a grape SWAT team for this shit cause 17-year-old girls in foster system. 9 out of 10 times it is grape. Well, she sits down and tells how her family was cartel and her cousins were enforcers. One day when she was like 8, her cousins pick her up and take her out to the desert where they have a 5-year-old boy. They make her choke him to death. I guess he was the kid of a family that owed them money. Usually for getting smuggled over. Needless to say, we didn't have a game plan for that shit. The police basically said, no body, no crime, since we had no actual details to identify on and the cousins she could name were dead, not in the country, or already in prison. Poor kid confessed she was forced to murder a child with her bare hands, and the result was nothing. No justice for her, for the kid, for the family. Just guess shit happens. Year later, she was 18 and out of the system to face a world she knows to be wildly different than how we all claim it to be in work. What's a grape SWAT team? Foster kids are a vulnerable population and abuse occurs. We have a liaison with the police, and dedicated staff and procedures to handle grape cases. Basically, you say the word grape and people instantly swoop into action. Child-on-child murder, however, that one left us a bit at a loss for proper procedure. Wow, that is truly one of the worst things I've ever read. Did they at least get her in therapy? God, I hope she's okay. I honestly can't imagine how she could be. This came as a result of her pre-existing therapy, but I can assure you the foster care therapist is not trained or experienced enough to properly handle these things. Not that there really is anyone who is. My great-grandfather came home from World War II with shell shock, and my great-grandma refused to sleep in the same bed as him because he would keep repeating, "No, don't kill Tom." Which was what he said before he witnessed his childhood friend getting killed. He luckily managed to get therapy, and was okay, but wheelchair-bound until I was about 11, where at Christmas dinner he sat while we all ate, completely frozen. My granddad asked, "You okay, Dad?" To which he started crying and suddenly let out a very loud and hurt-filled "Don't kill Tommy," and started crying. I know it's not scary, but it freaked me out. My grandpa never talked about the war. He was Ukrainian, my baba was Polish. I don't know exactly where they lived, but it was on the border between the two countries. My dad never could recall the name, but he said it was a town that had changed from Poland to Ukraine a few times. If anyone has any idea? But he was 16 when Germany invaded. 16 when he was forced to fight for his invaders. He refused to speak about it at all. Would never say anything except that he had been shot in the leg. His story skipped too. After the war I lived in London and that was it. I have no idea what that man went through. How awful it must have been, but I do remember sleeping at their house sometimes and hearing him sobbing saying, "Why God, why?" In absolute pain. My dad got into a car crash head-on with a convertible with a young couple in it, and the top part of the convertible window decapitated them instantly. He ended up falling into something red, berries, blood. And when the cops and medics showed up they were freaking out and telling him to lay down. He was actually fine. Witnessing that screwed him up though. I hope your dad is doing well. What a horrific thing for him to experience. He is doing alright. He was young when it happened in the 80s or 90s. This reminds me of a story. One day I'm out in my front yard cleaning my boat. My neighbor, Bob, comes over to chat and I take a break to drink a beer with him. About that time, another neighbor, Mark, strolled on by and we invited him to have a beer too. So we're sitting there on my boat drinking beer and we're catching up, asking how everyone's kids are doing, etc. Mark says, "Oh well, my boy's doing alright. The therapy is going well." Bob and I look at each other. Turns out neither of us knew he was in therapy. So I say, "Glad to hear he's doing better. What's he in therapy for?" Mark replies, "Oh right, I never told you. We ended up being right behind an accident a few weeks ago, and we were the first on scene. Well, my boy and I get out and try to help, but unfortunately the first thing my son found was the head of a little girl. She got decapitated on impact." We replied with shock and consolation. But then, Mark said, "Yeah, we hope he'll start talking again soon. I really miss hearing his voice." I moved away a few months later. Never did find out if Mark's son started talking again. Car accidents are terrifying. When I was a kid, there was a peeping Tom in the neighborhood. But the weird part is we all knew who he was, a little older guy named Ralph who lived a couple streets over and smoked like a chimney. We knew because he was caught once early on by a neighbor while on their roof, watching them through the skylight. The neighbor had left a ladder against the house when doing work earlier that day, but after that he was like a ghost, impossible to catch. People would find footprints and cigarette butts outside windows, smell cigarette smoke, and occasionally see the red cherry on the cigarette glow in the woods. Occasionally, angry dads and teenagers who spotted him out in the darkness would give chase, but he moved like a deer through the woods and no one could put hands on him. The cops were involved a few times and they dragged him in, but it was never for long, partially I think because he had a disabled wife for whom he was the sole carer. He was sorta a neighborhood boogeyman, though thankfully seemed mostly harmless if terribly creepy. Many years later, there were a rash of break-ins around the neighborhood. People even joked at the time that it must not be Ralph, because we all figured he had copies of everyone's hide keys already if he wanted to go inside. Side note, we later learned that he definitely did have keys to some houses. Anyway, everyone's guard was up. One night, one of the neighbors heard a commotion outside, and ran outside to find a stranger laid out in his driveway, beat to shit. They called 911 and when the police arrived, they were able to identify the guy as someone who had previous arrests for breaking and entering and found items from the previous break-ins in his vehicle nearby and later at his apartment. As for how he ended up taking a bloody nap in the driveway, he said he was jumped from behind in the dark and never got a good look at the guy. All he remembered for certain was that the guy stunk of cigarette smoke. Edit, dang, a bunch of people are curious about the keys. Basically we learned that one of the times he was picked up, they'd found a ton of keys on a pegboard. He claimed he just collected keys he'd found, and they had no labeling so there was no way to prove otherwise. So maybe he was just an avid key collector, but come on. How did you all come to find out that Ralph did in fact have keys to some of the houses? Did he eventually graduate to breaking and entering? One of my mom's friends married someone who was familiar with his case. Apparently, one of the times they arrested him, they'd found a ton of keys in his house on a pegboard. But apparently they weren't labeled and he just said he collected keys and didn't know what they went to. I knew a man who tranquilized his 6 kids and then shot them. When his wife returned home the house was burning and while she was agonizing over the kids he stared her in the face and slit his own throat. Stupid fucker didn't do it right and survived. In prison for the rest of his hopefully tortured life. His name was Jay Handel. Did he kill the wife? I hope not. No, but obviously she never really recovered. She had a very strong church group that gave her amazing support. I believe she passed away a few years ago. As a father it's beyond my imagination how someone can actually do any harm to his own child. I once hit my daughter's toe with a door and had big trouble to hide my own tears. There's absolutely no justification for what he did. And sadly, he isn't the only one to do such a thing. He came from a really dysfunctional family with a history of mental illness but again, no excuse. He liked to be a bigger-than-life type, which to me always indicated a weak ego. Sonia had separated from him and was trying to establish a new life. I believe the consensus was that he was punishing her for denying him control over her. His needs and ego were paramount. Me and girlfriend were in Ushuaia National Park and had to ask for a lift for the first time. I was scared as fuck, but there was no way of going out of that place without a car. We got in and there's an old couple. First thing they say to us is, you know? In this place they would only find your bones if you go missing. We asked politely to be dropped off in the next turn. Luckily next was a tour van that took us out, but for fuck's sake, my heart completely froze in that sentence. I'll tell a very personally scary one. Good friend of mine from high school was driving his perfectly normal family in their perfectly normal minivan on the highway. They were on vacation, headed to Disney World. A pickup coming the other way crossed the center line and hit them head on. He and his 2 sons were killed instantly. His wife and daughter, the youngest child, were critically injured but survived. He was literally one of the 2 or 3 genuinely kindest people I ever met. Got up that morning all set for a fun family adventure. Cruising along the highway, and then lights out. In an instant. And his wife/daughter left behind to go it alone. Bad things happen, to good people. To anyone, and you don't see them coming. As a parent, that's scary. Sorry for your loss. I know someone who experienced something very similar. A family with 3 kids under 10. Their mother was the only survivor of an accident caused by a teen who threw a stone down a bridge onto their car that went under the bridge at the same time. Absolute coincidence that it had hit that car, but her life changed completely from being a wife, a mother of 3 kids, to being widowed with no kids within seconds. Pure horror. Real scary guy I knew through a mutual friend once claimed he'd wait purposely to murder a rival of his in front of their children so that his legacy of treachery would be remembered. He then went on to do exactly that, shot a man to death at the breakfast table in front of wife and kids. What did the guy do to him? Organized crime, yes. He was contracted to kill this person for a good chunk of money, but he was also out to get him before that, as they had issues in the past before. Familial bad blood, generational feuds, etc. So, if someone tells you of such a plan in a vague future, what should you do? Nothing. Just like the first time around. I don't want my wife and kids to watch me get gunned down over a bowl of Kellogg's. Someone at my school vanished for a week with no leads other than a video of him on a security camera at a McDonald's 2 towns over. A week later his body turned up in the lake in a bay. They never figured out what happened to him. He was a really nice guy. Everyone always knew him as the kid who walked to school in shorts during winter or a blizzard. My suspicion is it was likely drug-related misadventure. People disappear all the time, but it really is weird when it's someone you know. I grew up in Toronto but moved away after grade 7. The credit card company used to put pics of missing kids on their statements, and, decades later, I recognized the girl on the envelope. We had gone to public school together. She had very dark hair, almost black, and a distinctive gap between her front teeth. Turns out a couple years after I moved out west she disappeared. There were been some sightings in the 2 or 3 years that followed, but nothing solid. And in next 30 or so years, nothing. One of my best friend's moms was abducted shortly after we finished high school. Weird is an understatement when you know them. It was a terrifying experience for me as someone looking in. He had moved to Sask and we were still in Winnipeg when it happened. We planed so many searches with the community but came up with nothing except her cell phone and glasses, which was found a few days after. She was taken behind our high school while training to go on a hike in Vancouver. About 5 years after her disappearance a hunter came across her skull, but that's all we've ever found of her. To this day we know nothing more. As for myself, I have since calmed down a lot, but I had initially went off the deep end. I had phone trackers on my immediate family as well as my girlfriend. Though I've calmed down, someone I know being taken terrifies me to no end. I hope I never have to be involved in anything like that again. Thelma Kroll. Yes, this story was in the news very recently. A friend's father just dropped dead while brushing his teeth with his youngest daughter, 6-year-old. They never found out what happened, so they figured he had a brain hemorrhage. Happened to my ex's father. He was late 50s and perfectly healthy. He traveled to London for a conference for work. He called after landing and checking into his hotel. Then, no one heard from him for 36 hours. They were able to get in touch with the police, who did a welfare check. They found he had died of a brain hemorrhage shortly after getting to his hotel room. My wife's neighbor completely lost his shit. He killed his whole family, the dogs, and he even shot the houseplants and the fish tank. Edit: since people keep saying silly things, this happened before my wife and I got married. Didn't even know she existed yet. Similar incident happened during the 90s in our locality. The dad shot and killed his wife, 3 kids, and himself while they were sleeping. The eldest son survived because he was sleeping at a friend's place that night. They seemed like a happy and well-to-do family, but apparently they had a lot of debt. The house was abandoned for a couple of years. Rumors also started that the house was haunted and people would hear the sound of death throes while walking past the house even during the day. My ex-brother-in-law is John Strutz. He's my ex-husband's little brother. He lived with us from 1998 to 2004-ish. He murdered his wife in 2009. They only found her torso. He disposed of the rest of her, but for some reason had her torso in his trash can on the curb when the cops came. John was much nicer than his brother, super dumb. The crazy, convoluted story he told? Absolutely sounds like something my ex would come up with. I can't prove it, but I know in my soul that John probably accidentally killed/grievously injured Kristen during some fight, panicked, and called his brother instead of calling 911, and Mike told him what to do and what to say. John's dumber than a sack of hair and didn't wipe his ass without consulting his psycho, but smarter brother. Mike is intelligent, but batshit insane and evil as fuck. John stuck to the story and will die in prison. His brother changed his name and washed his hands of him. I don't know what really happened that night, but I know that the whole hacksaw dismemberment and wild OJ type story sounds way more like my ex than something John would concoct on his own. I'm only shocked that my ex wasn't the one with a torso in his trash can. That is wild. Just went down the rabbit hole on Stutz. You can tell he's totally lying in a local news station interview. Give me a break. Glad you got away from that whole psycho family in one piece. Physically? Yeah. My sanity? Not so much. The whole experience was a life ruiner, still is. Had 3 kids with that evil fucker. Old Mike knew how to select a victim, I'll give him that much. I was undiagnosed autistic then, 0 family support, horribly toxic childhood and alone in the world. Isolated me, sabotaged my birth control pills, baby trapped me, tortured me mentally as well physically until my mind broke and used my special needs kids as weapons/leverage. He was way smarter than John. More evil and crazy too. Smart enough to know what he could get away with. John was just far dumber and unlucky. I was hiking down from doing 2 weeks of trail work in Colorado a few summers ago. A guy hiking up stopped to chat with us about our work and asked if we had seen anyone make the summit while we were up there. We told him that the first summit of the season had been done a few days prior and wished him luck. A friend of mine hiked in that area the next day and there was a helicopter circling around. The guy had taken the wrong gully back down and died. It's still crazy to me to think about. Were you with the Colorado 14ers initiative? Regardless, thank you for your hard work. I hiked all the 14ers in the early 2000s and came across a few groups. Oh, I was going up Mount Snowmass when I came across a body recovery team. Poor guy slid and was unable to self-arrest. No, I was with a different conservation corps. We were partnered with Rocky Mountain Field Institute. My mom and her friends used to hitchhike all the time in the 70s. They were offered a ride by a man and his wife one time but got weird vibes and weren't far from home so they refused. Turns out he was a serial rapist and preferred young women. The wife was always there to make the girls feel more safe taking the ride. It's so wild how so many of these stories revolve around hitchhiking. This one is personal. My family and I are staying in a rental house for a few months because my dad was shit with money. This particular house was owned by a fairly wealthy friend of his who was going through a divorce because his wife had developed a long and nasty drug problem. So, we're staying there pretty cheap. One night near Christmas, I groggily wake up and see a woman wearing white going through drawers on the other side of the room. I must have made a sound because she turned and rushed over to me and gently said, "Shush, go back to sleep little boy." Weirdly, I did. She looked like Liza Minnelli, if that's at all relevant. Next morning I wake up to my parents acting weird and I hear one of them make a comment like, "I can't tell what's gone and what's not." For some reason, I didn't connect the dots until I was older and never told them what I saw. I thought it was a dream. So yeah, the former crackhead owner of our rental house broke in, Probably had a key, and I saw her but didn't do or say shit. I was probably 9 or so. My family literally had a party to die for. We hosted a super late Christmas party in March. We invited a few neighbors over, including an older couple. Beyond a few weird comments from the old husband like, "I'm so glad I could have one last good meal," we all had a good time. Everyone kept telling us how great the party and food was. Eventually the old couple go home a bit earlier than the rest of the guests, and we don't think anything of it. About an hour later, as another guest was about to leave, they come rushing back into the house yelling about police and medics on our street. Turns out the husband of the old couple simply dropped dead about 30 minutes after they got home. I guess, to be fair, a big talking point at the party was how he was already basically on his last leg, thanks to health conditions, and it was only a matter of time, but we didn't think it'd be that soon. Hey, sounds like he knew he was done and you made his last day awesome. Sucks for you to deal with, but it sounds like the guy finished things exactly like he wanted to. I gave Aileen Warnos a ride a couple days before Christmas in 1990. Edit, sorry, for context, she was a serial killer in the Central Florida. In hindsight, it's kind of a funny story. When I was 16, I hung out with a rougher crowd. They let me hang out at one of the bars they owned in Daytona. These bars were generally in rougher areas of town. One night I was leaving at the same time she was. She was pretty drunk, and I offered her a ride because the neighborhood was dangerous. I dropped her off at the hotel she was staying at, cheap, by the week hotel, and headed home. A couple weeks later, I saw her on the news. Interesting, did you talk about anything with her? Not really, it was maybe a 5-minute ride. She was going the same direction I was. I offered her a ride, she accepted, thanked me and offered me $5 for gas. Crazy. My dad gave her a ride too. Not to her home. He said she was trying to have sex with him. He turned her down and said he loved his wife. My dad said that she started crying and asked to be let out. He thinks that's the only reason he survived. My mom and her friend were also picked up by Henry Lee Lucas. I don't know the whole story, but her and her friend literally dove out of the car while he was still driving because he wouldn't stop. Right as they did, he started cussing, beating on his steering wheel, and maybe, I don't remember if he started to turn around. A teenager in a sport car seen it, asked if everything is alright. My mom told him that he was trying to kidnap them. He said get in, and he floored it. My mom and dad had an encounter with a known serial killer and lived to talk about it. She don't like to talk about it. My dad said he felt sorry for her at the time. He didn't know she was a serial killer at the time. My mom said that the second they shut the door she knew. He was very non-emotional, looking straight at the steering wheel, saying very little. It's crazy. That's pretty freaky that both of your parents each had an experience with a serial killer. What are the odds? Yeah, it is. It gets worse. That happened to my parents in Florida. For my mom it happened to before she had kids, and for my dad it happened when I was a toddler. My parents are from Louisiana, but my mom was hitchhiking through Florida at the time. My dad was working out there doing HVAC, so the odds should have been lower. It gets worse because about 2 years later I was playing with my neighbor outside and this man on a mountain bike comes up. He asked me if I wanted to ride on his handlebars and I said no. Then he asked her and she said yes. Well, I left and went inside and forgot about it. A little while later her mom is asking everyone where she went. I tell her the man gave her a ride on his bike. She starts screaming and calls the police. The police come out and interview me. They have the dogs out immediately. I mean, they really went all out. They never find her during the initial search. A few days later she is found a few miles away naked crying in a park. Now, from what was told later, she wasn't S8, or at least not. The police told her mom and my mom they think he might have wanted a boy. She did look just like a boy at the time. From what I know, he was never caught. Almost my whole family, because now my brother was at AutoZone. He was an adult already. Late 20s or early 30s, he gets a ride from some dude in a green SUV. He told me the dude wouldn't stop. They came to a bridge in traffic, but he said the dude took out all of the door handles. They're in traffic and he's beating on the windows. It's doing nothing, so he jumps in the back to the 5th door where the trunk would be, opens it and jumps out running. The dude in the SUV is stuck in traffic at the mouth of the bridge. That's all I know about his situation. I have other siblings. They didn't almost become a statistic like the rest of the family though.